There is a significant development coming out of Kharkiv Oblast. In the Lozova area, a railway locomotive has reportedly been targeted in a Russian Geran drone strike. The importance of this attack is not necessarily the size of the target. It is the role that target plays within the logistics network. Lozova is an important railway area in Kharkiv Oblast. Railway routes from the area connect towards several operational directions. That means railway activity around Lozova has significance beyond simple local transport. And this is what makes a locomotive an interesting target. Not because a locomotive is a spectacular target, but because it is one of the assets that keeps the entire network moving. Without locomotives, trains do not move. And without trains, material cannot be transported at the same speed or volume. In modern warfare, logistics is one of the factors that determines how long military forces can sustain operations. What is even more interesting, this is reportedly not the first time locomotives around Lozova have been targeted. Previous reports in June also described attacks against locomotives and railway infrastructure in the area. So a pattern begins to emerge. The target is not simply the railway, it is the equipment that keeps the railway functioning. Now comes the bigger question. Why target a locomotive? After all, can it not simply be replaced? In theory, yes. But the problem is time and numbers. A railway network needs a large number of locomotives to keep operating efficiently. When several units are damaged, operators have to find replacements. Repairs have to be carried out. Schedules have to be reorganized. And in some cases, train movements may have to be adjusted. This is where the real effect begins to appear. Not necessarily in a single explosion, but through accumulation. One damaged locomotive may have only a limited effect. 2 or 3. Perhaps the system can absorb it, but if attacks against this type of asset continue, the pressure on the logistics network increases. Reports from June also described Geran 2 strikes against locomotives operating in the wider Lozova area. And further reports in early July again described attacks involving railway locomotives near Lozova. So the approach appears relatively clear. The objective is not necessarily limited to the front line. It is about putting pressure on the network behind it. Because forces at the front need ammunition. They need fuel, they need spare parts, they need vehicles. And all of those supplies have to move from the rear towards the battlefield. Railways offer a major advantage here. They can move large quantities of material efficiently. But that advantage also creates a vulnerability. If the railway network and the assets supporting it are repeatedly disrupted, the efficiency of the entire system can begin to decline. And that is why a locomotive can have far greater strategic value than its appearance suggests. Now we come to the most important question. Can one attack on a locomotive cripple Ukrainian logistics? No. We should not make that conclusion. One damaged locomotive does not mean the entire railway network has stopped. But if attacks repeatedly target the same type of asset, the picture becomes different. Because logistics warfare ultimately comes down to capacity. How many locomotives are available? How many are undergoing repairs? How many can operate each day? And how many are required to maintain the flow of supplies toward the front? This is why attacks on locomotives need to be viewed within a much wider context, not as isolated incidents, but as part of pressure against the transportation network. And there is another important factor. A locomotive cannot simply be replaced as quickly as a drone or a light vehicle. It is a heavy asset, expensive, complex, and dependent on maintenance facilities. So if attacks against these assets continue, Ukraine has to do one of two things: repair damaged locomotives or bring reserve units into service. Both require resources, and that is where the strategic effect can emerge, not necessarily through immediate destruction, but through increasing pressure on the logistics system. At the same time, there are limits to what we can conclude. We do not have enough independent evidence to say that this particular attack has crippled Ukraine's railway network. So the more reasonable assessment is this: The strike demonstrates an ongoing effort to put pressure on transportation and logistics by damaging or destroying railway assets. And if that pattern continues, the cumulative effect could become more significant. So, the reported strike in Lozova gives us a much bigger picture. War is not only about tanks at the front, it is not only about artillery, and it is not only about missiles. There is another war taking place far behind the front line, the war of logistics. And in that war, a locomotive can have far greater strategic value than it appears to have, because stopping one locomotive may only create a limited disruption. But if similar assets are repeatedly targeted, again and again, across different locations, the pressure on the logistics network can gradually increase. So let us think about this together. Could a sustained campaign against locomotives and railway infrastructure significantly reduce Ukrainian logistics over the long term? Or does Ukraine still have enough alternative routes and reserve assets to keep the system functioning? I want to hear your analysis. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy this kind of analysis, support the channel by liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications. Your support helps us continue covering military developments, not simply looking at one event, but understanding what lies behind it. Disclaimer: this video is produced for information and analysis purposes. Information regarding strikes and the extent of damage may come from parties involved in the conflict, and not all claims can be independently verified. For that reason, certain claims in this video are presented as claims from the relevant sources rather than independently established facts. This video does not support violence or encourage conflict. Its purpose is to examine military and logistical developments based on the information currently available. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next analysis.